Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video we're once again talking about the biggest need for every single NBA team, and this time we're talking about the Western Conference. I just did the Eastern Conference yesterday, if you guys missed that video, and as I said, today we'll be talking about the Western Conference in reverse order of the standings. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing to the channel. I upload twice a day, every day, and we're on the push towards 100,000 subscribers. We're less than 8,000 away, which is pretty wild. You can also leave a like rating on the video. It helps me out a ton. It lets me know that you're enjoying the content, and it helps get the video out to more people as well on YouTube. You can also hang out with me outside of these videos at twitch.tv/spolo_TD. I stream a guaranteed 5 times per week over there, and you can hang out in the Discord as well and talk with other people that also watch these same videos outside of the videos themselves. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, as I said, we're gonna go in reverse order of the standings here, which means that we're beginning, ironically, with the Golden State Warriors. It's pretty obvious here. It's kind of like when I talked about the Celtics in the Eastern Conference video. They need a big. They need someone at the 5 spot that can defend the rim, do some things offensively, be a good screener, but mostly they need someone that can just kind of fill that position on the roster. Whether they choose to fill that position with someone in the draft that they think has a good amount of upside moving forward in James Wiseman, or they choose to make a move via trade for a player, or they trade away Wiggins in the second pick for someone at the wing spot, and then they figure out the 5 spot in free agency. All those things are certainly an option, but it's pretty clear what the Warriors need, I think, at this point. I don't think I need to spend too much time on them. Moving on now to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I simply put defense. When you look at the top players in this roster, the guys that are going to play a significant amount, not many of them are good defenders at all. I mean, Josh Okogie, I think, can be a good defender. Other than that on this roster, I'm not really sure who you're looking towards as a guy that's really going to be able to defend. They're going to be able to score the basketball if D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns are right, if they're making shots off the ball. But if you can't defend it all to the level it looks like they're not going to be able to defend, it's going to be really tough to make the playoffs in the Western Conference next year, which I think is a goal for them. And so they definitely need to find some defense, some guys that can play on both ends of the floor for next season. Next up now, the New Orleans Pelicans, and I put shooting. I feel like they have, perimeter creators. They've got guys that can guard a little bit. They certainly have enough offense. They certainly have enough intriguing young players. But this is the reason why I put Davis Bertans as a potentially ideal fit in New Orleans, because more than anything, they need guys that can make shots, to create space for Drew Holiday, to create space for Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, even Jackson. He's at a certain level. If he's rolling to the rim, they need more spacing on this roster, more shooting on this roster, and I hope they go out and get it, because I'm excited to see what they look like with a presumably healthy Zion next season. Next up now is the Sacramento Kings, and I simply put, this is kind of like the Pacers yesterday, last video. I simply put, they need to figure it out. They need to figure out what they're doing at this roster. Are they bringing back Bogdanovich? Are they trading away Buddy Hield? What's the future of Marvin Bagley? What's the future of De'Aaron Fox? Are they building around those 2 players? Are they looking to trade them before they have to pay them more money? Are they planning on keeping Harrison Barnes on the roster? Like, what is the plan here? What are they trying to do moving forward? What's the cohesive path for this group? They need to figure that out. There are plenty of other holes on the roster. They need defense. They need shooting. They need to figure out what they have in Bagley. But for the most part, they just need to understand where their roster is going in Sacramento. Next up now, the San Antonio Spurs, and honestly, I'm going to put them in a pretty similar category to Sacramento. Is Greg Popovich going to stay as the head coach? If that's the case, is he okay with the rebuild? If he's not, then how are you going to put together a pretty good basketball team and also kind of plan for the future? Cohesive plan needs to be put together in San Antonio, other than just let's just run it back with our handful of young guards and see what happens. I need a plan from San Antonio, to be completely honest. Okay, now we're going to get to some actual roster stuff. Next up is the Phoenix Suns. Similar to the Minnesota Timberwolves, I just think they need defense. Like, I think they need guys that they can count on to guard. Hopefully Kelly Oubre will be back healthy. Someone like Javon Carter can certainly guard a good amount. And they put in a lot of effort in that stretch in the bubble that they won a lot of games. They were a lot better defensively than they had been during the regular season. So that is improvement. But from a personnel standpoint, I definitely still think they need an upgrade on the defensive end of the floor. And I would expect them to go out and try and address that this offseason. Next up now is the Memphis Grizzlies, and I also put shooting for them as well. I feel like I always talk about them and the Pelicans in kind of a similar way, and I like the pieces they have on their roster. And when you're talking about someone like John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., of course, I love those 2 players, but you can never really have enough spacing and enough shooting for me, and allowing those guys as much space as possible to do what they do as a tandem would be really, really helpful. And of course, Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of the better spacers on the floor as well, so he's certainly helping that cause. But going out and getting a couple more guys that can shoot certainly would help this roster, in my opinion. Next up now is the Portland Trailblazers, and this has been the case for a handful of years. This team desperately desperately needs some wings that can defend and can shoot. I know that there's been guys like Trevor Ariza there in the past, but they need someone that when they go into a playoff series, if they make the playoffs, that they can say, hey, I need you to go guard LeBron or Kawhi or whoever, and they can actually hold up in that matchup, at least okay. Like there have been way too many postseason series where guys that had no business guarding some of the better wings in the league went out there and tried to guard for Portland. They've certainly got the offense, right? And you know, that three-man group of Nurkic, McCollum, and Lillard is really, really good. Zach Collins is still kind of interesting as well, kind of floating around there. Anthony Simons is an intriguing player, but for me personally, man, like they have got to figure out the wing depth. They've got to figure out the defense in Portland if they're going to raise their ceiling at all moving forward. Next up now is the Dallas Mavericks. I hate to be repetitive here, but for me, wings are again an issue. They've got good players. Of course, they've got Luka. They've got KP. Seth Curry is someone that's out there spacing the floor. And like, no offense to Dorian Finney-Smith, but there needs to be an upgrade to where he's not the only like wing guy that you can rely on this roster, whether that's via trade, whether that's a star guy like Oladipo that can play both ends of the floor, whether that's in free agency this offseason or next. They need more guys that they can throw out there defensively to improve their versatility on that end of the floor, especially when you consider that Luka on the perimeter is not going to be a great defender, nor would you expect him to be because of the amount of responsibility he has on the offensive end of the floor. That's definitely a need that I think they need to address this offseason. Next up now, the Utah Jazz. I again put shooting. They have plenty of pieces on this roster that can, you know, that has the makings of a really good team in the Western Conference, but too often they fall behind in these games because the shot making just is not there off the ball. And I would look for them to continue to improve that, assuming we're not seeing some really drastic changes from this roster offseason, which is still to be determined. But assuming that we're going with a more realistic approach, they just need to add some shooters to this roster. Next up now, the Oklahoma City Thunder. I talked about this in a little bit in a previous video. I want them to add another young guy to grow and develop alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander because they've got all these picks and they've got these veterans that they can trade away. But I want another guy on this roster that can grow alongside SGA and they can really grow and develop a nice duo there, in addition to all these draft picks they have to continue to add to the talent pool. So whether that happens via trade or otherwise, having someone else there alongside Shai so they're not just relying on their picks for the development of the team moving forward would be really, really helpful in my opinion. 4 teams left now. The Houston Rockets are up next. And I wrote down, who knows? Like, who knows what this roster needs? They need a lot of things. They need their draft picks back. They need to figure out what kind of roster they're going to have for next season. Are they going to keep the small ball thing? Are they going to go big? There's just so many question marks surrounding Houston right now. I don't think that the answer for them is trading away James Harden or Russell Westbrook or even someone like Robert Covington. They have a lot of needs. They need defense. They need rebounding. They ironically need even more shooting because they have the volume, but they need guys that can shoot the ball better to really make this whole thing work. PJ Tucker is going to be a year older now. He's like 36 years old. Things aren't great in Houston is the point that I'm getting to. Next up now is the Denver Nuggets, and I just put that they need to retain Jeremy Grant. I don't think that I'm overstating the importance of him to their postseason run, to improving their defense. This is a team that's really struggled defensively for years now, and I'm not saying that Jeremy Grant was a fix-all for them, but his versatility, his ability to guard guys like Kawhi, guys like LeBron, and at least, hold his own a good amount, and as well as provide, steals and rebounding and rim protection. It's almost invaluable to a roster like Denver that doesn't have a ton of versatility or flexibility on the wings or in the front court. They can really score the ball, but defensively, Jeremy Grant does so much for them. They need to retain him, in my opinion. Second to last now, we'll just do both these at the same time. It's the Clippers and the Lakers. For me, it's just depth. Like, they need to figure out, for the Lakers, they need to add depth. The Clippers need to understand what depth they have and what depth they actually need. Because I thought that they had depth with Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell, and in the postseason, it turned out those guys were completely useless, so they might as well not even have been out there. So if you're discounting those two players, and the depth that I thought this team had doesn't actually exist, and they certainly need to figure that out. For the Lakers, they're still a very top-heavy team. Obviously, they won the title, but to continue to improve and to continue to improve their chances of winning future titles, bringing in more guys on the roster that can defend and can shoot and can rebound, do the small things outside of Anthony Davis and LeBron James needs to be a priority. They need to continue to add depth. It's one of the reasons that I didn't think they were going to be nearly as good as they were this year, is because of the limited depth. And obviously they were incredible this year and they figured it out, but they need to continue to make smart moves like they did throughout the season and last offseason to add to this roster and make sure they have the proper depth for another potential championship run next year. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, including the Eastern Conference version of this video, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.